America is the greatest country in the world. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our special Donald Trump, the Peace President. We're doing this because all of the hostages have been released from Hamas control in Gaza. 2 years underground in tombs, being tormented, tortured, starved, nearly to death. By torment, I mean they would play videos and audio of September 7th, 2023, of their loved ones being killed. They would starve them, but feast sitting right in front of them. They would cook food and have the smell go into the tombs, the cells they were living in. They kept them in squalor and filth. Hamas would light fires outside of their cells and smoke, put the smoke in there to choke them out of whatever little oxygen they even had. There was a story of one hostage who was in this cell underground, and 3 other people were put in this cell with him. And the one guy was already barely surviving in the filth, but also barely surviving. He barely had enough oxygen to breathe. And his thought was, how is there going to be enough oxygen with 3 more guys down here? Have you ever even considered being in such a horrific situation that you would have to worry about not having enough oxygen? Horrific. And our president rescued them. And only Donald Trump could have done it. Only Donald Trump did it. I want to share this. Foreign Affairs magazine came across this the other day. Foreign Affairs, an august publication, Foreign Affairs magazine, wrote an article, The Price of Unpredictability, How Trump's Foreign Policy is Ruining American Credibility. Oh, the horrors. It's terrible. This Donald Trump's awful. This article was written on October 2nd, 2025, written by Karen Yarhi-Milo, who is the Dean of Columbia University's, that's a Ivy League school, Dean of Columbia University's School of International Public Affairs. She's also a professor of international relations and co-editor, along with a one Hillary Rodham Clinton, former Secretary of State, of a book called Inside the Situation Room, The Theory and Practice of Crisis Decision Making. She wrote the book about it. She wrote that article on October 2nd. The deal to release the hostages was announced on October 8th. 6 days later. Donald Trump's the worst. He's terrible. He's awful. The international community despises him, and nothing he ever does is going to be a horrible embarrassment to the world. 6 days later. Here's Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, on the president.
I don't know if one day perhaps the entire story will be told about the events of yesterday, but suffice it to say, it's not an exaggeration that none of it would have been possible without the President of the United States being involved.
Don't just take it.
It really began with your trip to the Middle East, where these relationships were forged with partners in the region, personal relationships, close relationships that created the foundation where all this was possible. Where I think this really took a turn. Remember, a month ago, no one thought this was possible. Where it really took a turn about a month ago, less than a couple weeks ago, is when we were at the United Nations, and you convened a historic meeting, not simply of Arab countries, but of Muslim-majority countries from around the world, including Indonesia was there, Pakistan was there, and created this coalition behind this plan. Then on that following Monday, you met with the Prime Minister of Israel here, and that plan was presented. And then, of course, our great negotiating team followed up on it. In the interim, again, perhaps the stories will be told, perhaps they will never be told. The president had some extraordinary phone calls and meetings that required a high degree of intensity and commitment and made this happen. And I think what's important to understand is that yesterday what happened was really a human story. There's a geopolitical aspect to it, there's no doubt about it. It creates the conditions for Gaza to one day be a normal place again and people to have a better life and Israelis to be safe. But yesterday was a human story. And because of the work you put in, and honestly, not only is there no other leader in the world that could have put this together, Mr. President, but frankly, I don't know of any American president in the modern era that could have made this possible. Because of the actions you have taken unrelated to this and because of who you are and what you've done and how you're viewed. And this weekend, because of that, at some point very soon, we are going to see 20 living human beings emerge from the darkness into the light for the first time in 2 years. And that is because not only were you used the credibility and the power and the prestige of this office and the relationships you created, and you committed yourself to making it happen. And I think it will go down as a historic moment in the history of our country, and something our country should be very proud of, that we have a president that's committed to not just peace, but to the human aspect of reuniting these families.
Amazing. Don't just take it from Marco. This is an ABC News reporter.
I think today what I've been mostly struck by is Donald Trump's sheer force of personality. There are not many men, not many leaders who can walk into the Knesset in Israel to such rapturous applause, such a warm welcome, to clearly know so many members of the Israeli leadership so personally. He's been in the weeds on this, and then less than an hour later, appear in a room of world leaders, Arab and Muslim leaders, and have the same kind of warm welcome. It really is his force of nature which has managed to make this happen. I mean, I was struck that he was standing on that stage here in Sharm el-Sheikh, welcoming world leader after world leader, many of whom he's had his disagreements with, as we know. And it wasn't President Sisi of Egypt doing that, it was him. He is front and center here. His force of will, he has said what he wants to happen. He's laid out this 20-point plan. The objectives are very clear. And of course, the big question is how we get.
It's amazing. So 2 points. First, praised wherever he goes, whether it's in Israel or the Middle Eastern countries. And 2, only Trump can go to a foreign country and be the host. Be the host in a foreign country to the leader of that country. To him. He goes to Egypt, and the president of Egypt is like, "Oh, thanks for having me, Mr. President." The Prime Minister of Israel, before giving Trump the Israeli prize, the only non-Israeli, or the Israel prize, the only non-Israeli to ever get it, he said that Israel, this whole thing was in a desperate, hopeless situation. But when President Trump was elected, overnight, everything changed. Trump has these skill sets, but we can talk about this with our guests coming up, these skill sets to be able to make deals and apply leverage, find out what people really want, get to the heart of it, solve problems. Netanyahu said, "I've never seen anyone move the world so resolutely and so decisively as Donald J. Trump." I heard someone say it was a congressman, I forget who it was. It was after Trump didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize, who, by the way, the woman who did win the Nobel Peace Prize, that was Marco Rubio's submission. And she dedicated it to Donald Trump. She said he's the only man who can stop Maduro in her home country of Venezuela, and he's the only man who could bring peace around the world today. The Nobel Peace Prize winner dedicated her Nobel Peace Prize to Donald Trump, which is pretty good. But I heard this congressman say, people are upset that the president didn't win. And this congressman said, win? Like, win? No, anyone can win the Nobel Peace Prize. They need to rename it after Donald Trump. I love that thing. Think big. Let's think bigger than winning it. Big deal. Big whoop. You won it? Who cares? You need to take it over. The Trump Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize, a real quick story, named after Alfred Nobel because Alfred Nobel saw an obituary that was written about him. He was still alive. And it called him like the Merchant of Death because he invented dynamite for peaceful purposes, but it was used for war. And he didn't want that to be his legacy. So he made this prize to try to cover up his legacy of death and called it the Nobel Peace Prize. He never brought peace. So why not name the prize after someone who's actually brought peace all around the world? Because it's not just Hamas and Gaza. Trump claims, and it's true, that he's now ended 8 conflicts around the world. Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is a big one because Armenia used to be very closely aligned with Russia, but they're abandoning Russia. So Russia's abandoned them in many ways, and now they're moving closer to America. That's a huge deal, that Armenia-Azerbaijan deal. The Congo and Rwanda, 30 years. They both signed a peace agreement in the White House, not in Brussels, not in Norway with the Nobel Peace Prize, not in Switzerland, in the United States of America. Israel and Iran, there was the 12-day war. India and Pakistan, we have 2 nuclear powers who are about to pop off. Cambodia and Thailand. Egypt and Ethiopia, that was a big one about the Nile River. And Serbia and Kosovo. Most of those countries, but in that last one especially, said, listen, we're not going to sign an economic deal with you unless you both knock it off. And now with Gaza, followed up with the Abraham Accords in the Middle East, hosting Middle Eastern peace summits, unbelievable. To go back to that Foreign Affairs article a moment ago, Chris Rufo wrote this message the other day. He said, I remember taking classes from high-flying diplomats and professors at Georgetown School of Foreign Service, and I was so impressed with all their sophistication and academic knowledge. But in retrospect, those are the same people, literally the same, or at least the same kinds of people, who oversaw foreign policy disaster after disaster. But by contrast, Trump brings in real estate dealers and his own 30-something son-in-law as negotiators, and they achieve unprecedented peace deals. Common sense wins. It's worth listening to the speech that Trump gave at the Israeli parliament. It's really funny and good, but especially the part where he goes through his team and he talks about his team. And he's like, yeah, I got this guy, Steve Witkoff. He's like, he's a great negotiator, but there's a lot of great negotiators. He's a great real estate guy. There's a lot of great real estate guys. He said what Steve Witkoff has that made him so effective is everyone likes him. Everyone likes him. Just like a regular guy. Like in the Bible, right? It's the fishermen over the scribes, the brilliant scribes and Pharisees. Pharisee today is like a pejorative. Oh, don't be a Pharisee. Back then it was, oh, a Pharisee. Oh, wow. It was the fishermen that Jesus spoke to. 1 Corinthians 1:25 says, the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. Do you remember how much they scared you about Trump, or tried to? Oh, he said, the nuclear codes, you can't trust him, he'll start nuclear war. He said this when he was at the Israeli parliament.
It is a good feeling. Isn't that nice to say? You know, I just said the hostage, first time I said the hostages are back. It feels so good to say it. But when you settle 8 wars in 8 months, that means you don't like war. Everyone thought I was going to be brutal. In fact, I remember Hillary Clinton during a debate, she said, look at him, he's going to go to war with everybody. And actually, she said, he's got a personality that's all about war. No, and my personality actually is all about stopping wars, and it seems to work. It seems to work.
Don't let Trump near the nuclear codes. He's a warmonger. No. Donald Trump is the peace president. 2 wonderful guests. Coming up next, the editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner. But right after this break, Mike Baker will be here, host of one of the top podcasts in the country, President's Daily Brief, right here on the First TV. Welcome back to our special on Donald Trump, the peace president. Let's go right to the great Mike Baker, host of one of the top podcasts in the country, President's Daily Brief. Mr. Baker, how are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well, thanks, man. Thank you very much, Mike. Appreciate it.
I'm grateful you're here. From your perspective, what is the most impressive part of, let's start with the Israel-Gaza peace deal. What's the most impressive part? What was the most difficult thing about bringing the Muslim world together to make this happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the most difficult part is listening to the crap that's being slung by some of the Democrats who say that he just enacted Biden's peace plan. I mean, I am shocked that they're just being so brazen. So Jake Sullivan and a variety of others, and some of sort of the toadies who get out in social media for the Democrats are all pushing the same line. So you see the memo went out, and the memo said, okay, just tell people that Biden left the blueprints for this peace plan on the desk, on the Resolute desk, and now Trump's trying to take credit for it. And I think that is incredibly impressive, even for the Democrats.
Yeah, it took them like 2 days to come up with that even.
Yeah.
They had nothing for 2 days. They had and there were a couple Democrats who came out and they're like, oh, it was pretty good, I guess, right? But they couldn't settle
very
that.
Very begrudgingly. So, look, I mean, I think the reality here is that it was a tremendous amount of work on the part of a lot of people, right? Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Marco Rubio, a lot of people in this administration pushing to try to do something that really hasn't occurred all that often, and that's to get a number of the Arab states on board with the same concept, which is this has got to stop. You have got to put pressure on Hamas, right? Which in a way means you've got to exert pressure on the Iranian regime, but that's another conversation to have. So I think it's remarkable what they've been able to do. I think that people also at the same time need to be pragmatic and understand that as wonderful as it is to have accomplished this, to get the hostages back, right? The logical conclusion is not peace in this region. That I think is going to prove to be, unfortunately, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm basing this on, I'm watching this region and being there and getting involved in some of these things in the past. That's going to be very complex. And we're already seeing holes start to show up in this. Hamas has never talked about disarming up to this point. They still haven't talked about it. They haven't talked about the idea that they're going to give up governance. So those are two major sticking points here that I think are going to be hard to overcome. So while you can be extremely happy that there's a temporary ceasefire, nobody should imagine that this then leads to a longer term peace, because Hamas isn't going to give up their weapons.
Yeah. Does prosperity speak to them at all? Like, is that another way that would cause them to give up, or no? Are they moved by a totally different thing?
Yeah, I don't think so. Prosperity would speak to the people of Gaza, but those people are now under the gun of Hamas, right? It took a handful of days, right, for them to start exacting vengeance and retribution. So, Hamas is already out on the streets. They reactivated several thousand fighters as the ceasefire deal was coming together. And that was because they wanted to be on the streets the minute that Israel withdrew from the stated initial withdrawal line back to the yellow line, to exert control and to take vengeance on anyone that they view as a problem. And it's not so much they're trying to couch this as we're going after collaborators of Israel. You know, what they're doing is they're going after anybody that they view as problematic to their control of Gaza. And that, in a big way, means clans, means some of the militias that for the past couple of years, with Hamas being degraded, those clans have been kind of taking control of the security of their own territory inside of Gaza. And Hamas won't have any of that, right? So those are the people that are being killed on the streets.
Okay. We'll continue following it. I want to take some time to jump to some of the other conflicts, wars that have been resolved or solved. Let me just run through the list real quick, and you can pick whichever one you want. We mentioned earlier Armenia and Azerbaijan, Congo and Rwanda, Israel and Iran, the 12-day war, India, Pakistan, Cambodia, Thailand, Egypt, Ethiopia, and Serbia and Kosovo. Any one of those stand out to you the most?
Yeah, and it's an amazing list, right? And again, President Trump's not going to get the credit, I think, because he's Trump. And so he can be a very polarizing figure. But that's an amazing list of conflicts at various stages that have been resolved, either for long term or even in the short and midterm. That's a good thing. I would point to India, Pakistan, because that one has the potential to really spin out of control. And you're talking about very bad things to happen if those two countries really get into a shooting match. So I was impressed with the way that the Trump White House dealt with that issue.
What can you help us understand about the mindset of people around the world and how it's different than ours when it comes to peace and war? Like, we like peace. It's a value we have in America. Is that true everywhere?
It's not true everywhere. I think, at a certain level it is, right? At a certain sort of that community, village, whatever level, people just want to get on with their lives and they just want to, but it's not true when you start to move up the food chain. So in a very simplistic way, the villagers of a small village in Afghanistan, they just want peace. And you get up to the village elders, what do they want? Well, they want authority, control over, the territory and maybe the village across the way. And then you move up further, and what do you get? So the higher you go up the food chain in any establishment, I think the further away they move from the idea that, we all want to live as a community of nations. Part of it is also, look, you've got places like China and Xi Jinping. Right? Xi Jinping will always do what is exactly in China's best interests. And right now he feels that what's in its best interest is to bring Taiwan, as an example, back into the fold. So you look at that as a potential flashpoint for a conflict. Putin, obviously we've had this massive land war going on for 3.5 years. And it's incredible how it can sometimes fade off into the distance. Like during this ceasefire issue with Hamas, you were hard pressed to find any news about what was going on in Ukraine. But Putin has no interest in peace. That's not his game, right? He's said what he wants, and he's said it repeatedly, is to reestablish in some form the former Soviet Union. Not the whole thing, but he feels that the collapse of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of the 20th century. So he wants to try to figure out a way to bring back the glory of the Russian motherland, or whatever he wants to call it. So, yeah, you can argue that, I don't think peace is a uniquely American thing, or the desire for peace, but it's not a universal thing either.
What do you make of when Trump was running for president? We heard all the time from the Democrats that, we can't let him near the nuclear codes, and he's such a warmonger, and he's going to launch wars for no reason all over the world. We also started off the show with this woman. She's the dean of the Columbia University School of International Affairs. She used to work for Hillary Clinton. She just wrote 6 days before the hostages were released. She wrote an article about Trump's unpredictability and how he's so horrible for international affairs and our allies and all the rest. Right? How wrong these so-called experts and credentialed class have been all these years. Just so horrifically wrong. What's your insight there?
Yeah, you're right. They have been. And look, can things seem somewhat chaotic when you talk about U.S. foreign policy, during a Trump administration? Well, yes, but that can be an advantage, right? I mean, again, people always say this about Trump. He's transactional. Well, yes, he is. He's very transactional. He, came out of a world where he was a tri-state property developer, right, and then expanded the business, and so that he, that is what he is. But that nature of doing a deal, of finding a way to solve a problem, right? Not some grand 30,000 foot strategy, but saying, here's a problem here. I'm going to solve this. Now, look, there's a problem over here. I'm going to move over there and solve that. That actually can prove to be very effective when you're talking about trying to resolve conflicts, as we're seeing from this administration. And also his somewhat chaotic nature, I think, has, clearly been advantageous in our dealings with China. And even though we're looking at this back and forth with the China trade negotiations, it's kept the Chinese regime on the back foot. It keeps them guessing. They can't predict what he's going to do. And that's to our advantage, to the American advantage.
Better than having them in the driver's seat, which they've been for a long time. Mike Baker, host of the President's Daily Brief. Go join millions of other people who listen to that podcast every single day. President's Daily Brief. Mike, you're the man. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Mike. Talk to you next time. Take care.
Keep up the wonderful work. Coming up next, we'll talk with the editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner right here on the First TV. Spread the word.
My proudest legacy will be that of a peacemaker and unifier. That's what I want to be, a peacemaker and a unifier.
Let's go right to Hugo Gurdon. He's the editor-in-chief of the Washington Examiner. Hugo, how are you, sir?
I'm very well. How are you doing, Matt?
Fantastic, especially after the wonderful news out of the Middle East. Can you put this into words for us about your hope for what happened and what is to come?
Well, my hope is that the wider peace in the Middle East is not out of reach. Clearly, the things that we're seeing Hamas doing, murdering people again in Gaza in sort of gangland warfare doesn't look like much promise. But it seems to me that Hamas is now entirely is isolated. What this peace has done, first of all, is obviously bring the hostages back to Israel. Not all of those who are dead have been returned, but the live ones are now back. So Hamas has lost its leverage. I think that this is a huge achievement just in doing that. But there's another aspect to this, which I think is a huge achievement for peace in the region. And that is that President Trump, through a mixture of very strong actions, for example, the bombing of the Iranian nuclear facilities, and diplomatic ones, which were to bring in Turkey, bring in the other Arab neighbors of Israel, and get them behind the deal. This helped to isolate Hamas. And even if Hamas returns to the kind of ghastly behavior which is in its DNA and in its charter, I think that the peace that President Trump has engineered here is going to have lasting effects on Israel's relations with its important state neighbors. They are sick to death of the Palestinian issue. And the truth is that the Arab world hates the whole thing. That's one of the reasons why Egypt and Jordan won't allow Palestinians in. So they will have much more normalized or normal relations with Israel. And that's a big deal for regional peace.
That's amazing. How that happened? What changed in those other countries? And what was President Trump able to bring to the table to make this clear?
Well, first of all, what changed to some extent was that this is now being the intractable Israel problem for the Arabs has been going on for like 3/4 of a century. And they had become heartily sick of it. And then in the first Trump administration, the Abraham Accords were signed, and some of the UAE, which is an important country right in the region, but also lesser ones like Bahrain or distant ones like Morocco and Sudan, they joined the Abraham Accords. So that precedent was set there. And you know very well that countries the big one would be Saudi Arabia. You know very well that they are heartily sick of the Palestinian issue. And what has been exposed is that this isn't really about national sovereignty for the Palestinians. The Hamas and the Palestinian movement has been exposed as a proxy for Islamist genocidal war against the Jews. And the surrounding Arab countries are, as I say, sick of that. And then what happened is, instead of having an administration like the Biden administration, which wanted to reopen the Iran nuclear deal, etc., what President Trump did was to, with Israel, and actually Israel did an enormous amount here, is to break that ring of fire around Israel. Not only after Hamas invaded did Israel go in and not do what they've done before, which is kind of a punitive strike, but go in there and defeat Hamas. And people should realize that Hamas has been defeated. And they also eliminated Hezbollah in the south of Lebanon. And they also went and took out the Iranian air defenses so that when the US stealth bombers went over, the Iranians didn't fire a single shot. And we smashed their nuclear facilities. So suddenly, the ring of fire around Israel has been eliminated. Hamas is sort of by itself. And then the real kind of final point, I think, was that because President Trump was supporting Israel, and Israel attacked the Hamas leaders, it didn't actually get them, but it didn't mind firing missiles into the country that was hosting them, Qatar. And I think the Qataris suddenly thought, wait a second, Israel is willing to fire missiles at us, and we are an American ally. And I don't think there's much doubt that the Trump administration knew about it. So it was this fist that the United States allowed Israel to use, isolation of Hamas, and then the Arab countries coming along, already sick of it, saying, Hamas, you've got to agree to this deal. And one thing that I should really emphasize is this deal is not the same one that Biden tried to move in like 10 months, 11 months ago. A lot of people on the left are trying to say, oh, we got a ceasefire 10 or 11 months late. No. The original one, the Biden one, was for the handover of some, but not all of the hostages. And that's a huge difference because that would leave Hamas with leverage. And it would not have left Israel commanding about half of the Gaza Strip. It would have had more of a withdrawal. So this is a different deal. It's very much down to American support for Israel using its power, and then also saying to Israel, okay, you've got to do a deal, and so do you, Hamas.
Perfectly explained. Obviously, we've heard this word a million times, but can you help us understand exactly what the Abraham Accords are and why they're so important?
Yeah, well, they are normalizing diplomatic relations between Arab countries which in the past have refused to acknowledge the legitimate existence of Israel. Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, UAE, and what this essentially, the Arab world since 1948 has not had, or most of it has not had diplomatic relations because they don't believe that Israel is anything other than the Zionist entity. They don't call it a country. They don't recognize its statehood. They won't meet with its people. This is why, they don't want the, Israeli athletes. They won't, fight Israeli. They want to compete with Israeli athletes, etc. They just basically say it has no right to exist. So having no diplomatic relations means that they are on the side of the people who want to eliminate Israel. You get a few who've now signed the Abraham Accords, and of course, under the part of that was America moving its embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv. The more you have Arab countries saying, okay, we want to join the Abraham Accords, that means normalizing relations. That means recognizing Israel's right to exist. It means more and more Arab countries, which previously have simply sided with those who want to eliminate Israel, now say, okay, Israel does have a right to exist. We accept it. We want normal diplomatic trade relations, etc.
And what comes from that now, you think?
Well, there's a complication because, of course, Hamas, as I say in its charter, it's always going to be trying to murder Jews. That's the way it absurdly thinks it's going to eliminate Israel. It won't do that. But whilst it murders Jews, creates terror, and says that this is all about the legitimate aspirations for nationhood by the Palestinians, it's difficult for Arab neighbors to come on board the Abraham Accords. I believe that the Middle East is changing sufficiently that even if not very quickly, nevertheless, over a period of time, more Arab countries will join the Abraham Accords. They will recognize Israel's right to exist. And then, I don't know, I wrote just recently, yesterday, that, maybe, although I can't hold out too much hope for this, but maybe Hamas turns out to be like the IRA in Ireland a generation ago, where once they'd kind of basically lost their political move, they just became kind of criminal gang, and they through extortion and theft and drug running and that sort of thing, they just enriched their members. And of course, we know very well that the leaders are very interested in being rich. They're worth billions of dollars, and their soldiers, as they're called, keep fighting, but they're off enjoying billions of dollars. And they preferred not to they preferred not to be eliminated because that was their choice. They chose to continue to be alive and enjoy their billions. So, conceivably the terrorists will move in that direction. But frankly, it always is the case that political and ideological fanaticism is going to trump money, and that's what October the 7th, 2023 proved, that even though they were getting billions of dollars, they still eventually came back and murdered as many Jews as they could.
Yeah. Got about a minute and a half. How can you articulate the importance of Donald J. Trump in making this happen? And is there any other member of his team that you think did an exceptionally exemplary job?
Yeah, I think Donald Trump was just without him, it wouldn't have happened. It certainly didn't happen under the previous administration, but it also, because he is an outsider and he is rejected and repudiated and excoriated and hated by the Washington establishment for not doing things their way, he has a kind of freedom to do them the way, to change the narrative. He said, I'm not going to do this the way that all of you guys have been doing it for decade after decade after decade and failing. I'm going to do this differently. And he's a very transactional president. So, he sent his Steve Witkoff to the Middle East. He sent Jared Kushner. They're sort of deal makers. There's money involved. There's businesses involved. And he just talked to the Arab world in a different language. And you should also remember that his first trip abroad in this second administration, he went to the Middle East. He went and said, we're not here to try and change who you are or turn you into a Western nation. Yes. You have your own traditions. You're proud of them. We're not trying to change that. We just want to live you. We want you to have a great region. And then that really resonated with the Arab world. So Donald Trump did things differently right from the start. Other members of the administration, Donald Trump praised Marco Rubio, called him perhaps the greatest Secretary of State ever. I don't know whether that's the case, but he's been very, very articulate, very forceful, very clear. He's been a great explainer of State Department policy. I would certainly single him out. I think he's the one that I would single out.
Yeah. Here's so many more years of it. Hugo Gurdon, editor-in-chief of the wonderful Washington Examiner. Hugo, great to talk to you. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.
Wonderful stuff. Let's come back and wrap up with our Politics by Faith segment. Blessed are the peacemakers. What does that mean in Matthew 5:9? We'll talk about it next right here on the First TV. Spread the word. Welcome back to our special Donald Trump, the Peace President. Gosh, it's only been like a year. Imagine you got many more to go. Wonderful. This was the newspaper in Israel the day after, or the day the hostages were released, or when the deal was announced. The peacemaker. Where does that come from? It's in Matthew on the Sermon on the Mount. I highly recommend my favorite collection of analysis of the Sermon on the Mount. It comes from the great Martin Lloyd-Jones. Just search for Martin Lloyd-Jones. I forget what it's called. It's called The Study on the Sermon on the Mount, maybe something like that. It's got like a dark cover with stars on or something like that. It's awesome. It's the best. And it goes through line by line. Everything in the Sermon on the Mount is just great. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn, the meek, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful, the pure in heart, those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. And blessed are the peacemakers. That's verse 9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. 3 points. First, a peacemaker. What is that? Well, it's not just someone who doesn't make trouble, right? A peacemaker doesn't just stay out of the way. I'm trying to think of an international example, like Morocco. I don't know. Like, what's a country? Name a country that no one ever. New Zealand. There's a good one. New Zealand. New Zealand's not a peacemaker. They're just staying out of the way. A peacemaker actively goes out to make peace. It doesn't say, blessed are the not quarrelsome. It says, blessed are the peacemakers. Our president has gone out of the way, out of his way, to secure peace. It was one of his international trips. I think it was maybe to Alaska when he was meeting Putin. I forget which one. But he was on the plane and he's like, listen, I don't have to deal with this. I got enough to do. I got stuff at home. I think he said, I don't need this headache. I think that's what he said. Like, that's like the best attitude. It's like, I don't need to be doing this. But I see people dying. And we got to stop it. We got to stop people from dying. We got to stop people from getting killed for no reason. That's going out of your way to make peace. I don't need to be doing this. Jesus is called the Prince of Peace. And if you're making peace, you're acting like a child of God. Second point. Jesus is talking here about you and I, you and me, not necessarily about international affairs. The peacemaking that Jesus is talking about is not ignoring the sin in our own lives. Remember, peacemaking is not truce making. It's not staying away from battles. It's not ignoring battles. It's actively making peace based on truth. True peace cannot be achieved at the expense of righteousness or ignoring sin. That's not peace. And when you live in the truth and in Jesus, you can then tell others that this is the way of peace as well. Third point, to effectively be a peacemaker for others, you have to have peace yourself, peace with God. How do you do that? Confess your sin, repent, become a Christian. Because if you're not a Christian, you're an enemy to God. This is very like, people don't like this. But if you're not a Christian, you're an enemy to God. God loves everyone. James 4:4, you adulterous people. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Therefore, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of God. Now, you got to go back to the scripture. Listen, I can say things, and I get it's good. It's good. You should be like, I don't know. So that sounds a little harsh. I've never heard that before. It sounds rough. Great. Let's go right to the word. James 4:4. If you're a friend of the world, you're an enemy of God. Romans 5 says, therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. It doesn't say we have peace. It doesn't say we have the peace of God. The peace of God is, oh, so I have peace be in my heart. That's not what it says. We have peace with God. Why? Because God's going to send you to hell. You better get peace with him. Blessed are the peacemakers. Go get peace. So the 3 points. You have to actively seek peace to be a peacemaker. Peace based off the truth is all that matters. It is worthless. It's not peace if it's not based off the truth. It's a false peace. You don't get peace by lying or ignoring sin. And Jesus is the truth. Third point, if you're not a Christian, you're an enemy to God. So get right with God so that you can have peace from God. And then tell others where they can get it too. Which leads me to my final point on the President of the United States. This is like the second or third time I've heard the president kind of joke about this in a way. And he always has this laugh when he does it. Here.
I'm being a little cute. I don't think there's anything going to get me in heaven. Okay, I really don't. I think I'm not maybe heaven bound. I may be in heaven right now as we fly in Air Force One. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make heaven, but I've made life a lot better for a lot of people.
I hear there's a lot of Christians who kind of like pounce on Trump anytime he says something about salvation. Like, oh, it's this. Here's my message. You can be heaven bound. If you're not a Christian, you're not, but you can be. Now, 2 points. First, there's nothing you can do to be heaven bound. Meaning, no matter how many peace deals you sign, no matter how many lives you save through peace negotiations, no matter how many wars you prevent, none of that will get you to heaven. Won't work. Only faith in Jesus can get you to heaven. That's it. It's the only way. No other way. Now, on the flip side of that, because the other comment he made about salvation was, I've done a lot of bad things. It was along those lines, like, I don't know. It's kind of a lot. I've done a lot. Right? The other point is no depth of sin is out of the reach of Jesus' salvation for you. Right? It doesn't matter what you've done. Isn't that interesting? There's nothing you can do to get to heaven, and there's nothing you can do to keep you from heaven. There's no sin you could have ever committed, or series of sins, or lifetime of sins that can keep you from heaven either. There's one way to God, and that way can cover every sin you've ever committed. There's still time. There's still time for the president to repent, be baptized, become a Christian. Still time for you too. Politics by Faith is the name of my podcast. You listen to it anywhere you listen to podcasts. We do it about every day. Talk about the news of the day, run it through the Bible. It's all there. Been doing it for years. And now it feels like we're in a revival moment in this country. Okay? Let's make sure we know the truth. This is what this country was built on. The great lies from Satan in our lifetime. So this country's not a Christian country. We weren't founded on, we're founded by a bunch of deists. Nonsense. It's a Christian nation. We've lost our way. It's time to get it back. Politics by Faith is the podcast for you if you agree with that. Slater Radio on Twitter and Instagram. Mike Slater, First TV. Spread the word.